Okay, today is 27th of July 2010. Now we continue the Majjhima Nikaya. We come to Sutta number 22, Alagaddupama Sutta, the simile of the snake. Thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, another Pitdika spa. Now on that occasion, a pernicious view had arisen in a monk named Arita, formerly of the vulture killers. Thus, as I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, those things called obstructions by the Blessed One are not able to obstruct one who engages in them. Several monks, having heard about this, went to the monk Arita and asked him, Friend Arita, is it true that such a pernicious view has arisen in you? Exactly so, friends. As I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, those things called obstructions by the Blessed One are not able to obstruct one who engages in them. Then these monks, desiring to detach him from that pernicious view, pressed and questioned and cross-questioned him thus, Friend Arita, do not say so. Do not misrepresent the Blessed One. It is not good to misrepresent the Blessed One. The Blessed One would not speak thus, for in many discourses the Blessed One has stated how obstructive things are obstructions, and how they are able to obstruct one who engages in them. The Blessed One has stated how sensual pleasures provide little gratification, much suffering and much despair, and how great is the danger in them. With the simile of the skeleton, with the simile of the piece of meat, with the simile of the grass torch, with the simile of the pit of coals, with the simile of the dream, with the simile of the borrowed goods, with the simile of the tree laden with fruit, with the simile of the slaughterhouse, with the simile of the sword stake, with the simile of the snake's head. The Blessed One has stated how sensual pleasures provide little gratification, much suffering and much despair, and how great is the danger in them. Yet although pressed and questioned and cross-questioned by them in this way, the monk Arita, formerly of the vulture killers, still obstinately adhered to that pernicious view and continued to insist upon it. Stop here for a moment. So this monk Arita is saying that obstructions are not really obstructions. So these obstructions, you see here, when the monks start to question him and all that, they talk about sensual pleasures. So obstructions here refers to sensual pleasures. Because during the Buddha's time, there were many ascetics who were naked. Monk ascetics as well as non-ascetics. And so sometimes seeing naked bodies, they were stirred and then they engaged in this sensual pleasures. The Buddha says that is wrong. And this simile of the skeleton, piece of meat, etc. actually a more detailed description is given in the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta 54, Potalya Sutta. So later we will come to that. Okay, to continue. Since the monks were unable to detach him from that pernicious view, they went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, they sat down at one side and told him all that had occurred, adding, Venerable Sir, since we could not detach the monk Arita, formerly of the vulture killers, from this pernicious view, we have reported this matter to the Blessed One. Then the Blessed One addressed a certain monk thus, Come, monk, tell the monk Arita, formerly of the vulture killers, in my name that the teacher calls him. Yes, Venerable Sir, he replied. And he went to the monk Arita and told him, The teacher calls you, friend Arita. Yes, friend, he replied. And he went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, sat down at one side. The Blessed One then asked him, Arita, is it true that the following pernicious view has arisen in you? As I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, those things called obstructions by the Blessed One are not able to obstruct one who engages in them. Exactly so, Venerable Sir. As I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, those things called obstructions by the Blessed One are not able to obstruct one who engages in them. And the Buddha said, misguided man, to whom have you ever known me to teach the Dhamma in that way? Misguided man, in many discourses have I not stated how obstructive things are obstructions, and how they are able to obstruct one who engages in them. I have stated how sensual pleasures provide little gratification, much suffering and much despair, and how great is the danger in them. With the simile of the skeleton, with the simile of the piece of meat, with the simile of the grass torch, with the simile of the pit of coals, with the simile of the dream, with the simile of the borrowed goods, with the simile of the tree laden with fruit, with the simile of the slaughterhouse, with the simile of the sword's stake, with the simile of the snake's head. I have stated how sensual pleasures provide little gratification, much suffering and much despair, and how great is the danger in them. But you, misguided man, have misrepresented us by your wrong grasp, and injured yourself and stored up much demerit. For this will lead to your harm and suffering for a long time. Stop here for a moment. So this silly fellow, even in front of the Buddha, he says, what the Buddha calls obstructions are not obstructions. And then the Buddha continues. Then the Blessed One addressed the monks thus, monks, what do you think? Has this monk Arita, formerly of the vulture killers, kindled even a spark of wisdom in this Dhammavinaya? How could he, Venerable Sir? No, Venerable Sir. When this was said, the monk Arita, formerly of the vulture killers, sat silent, dismayed, with shoulders drooping and head down, glum, and without response. Then knowing this, the Blessed One told him, misguided man, you will be recognized by your own pernicious view. I shall question the monks on this matter. Then the Blessed One addressed the monks thus, monks, do you understand the Dhamma taught by me as this monk Arita, formerly of the vulture killers? Thus, when he misrepresents us by his wrong grasp and injures himself and stores up much demerit. No, Venerable Sir, for in many discourses the Blessed One has stated how obstructive things are obstructions, and how they are able to obstruct one who engages in them. The Blessed One has stated how sensual pleasures provide little gratification, much suffering and much despair, and how great is the danger in them, with the simile of the skeleton, with the simile of the snake's head, etc. The Blessed One has stated how great is the danger in them. Good monks, it is good that you understand the Dhamma taught by me thus, for in many discourses I have stated how obstructive things are obstructions, and how they are able to obstruct one who engages in them. I have stated how sensual pleasures provide little gratification, much suffering and much despair, and how great is the danger in them. With the simile of the skeleton, with the simile of the snake's head, etc. I have stated how great is the danger in them. But this monk Arita, formerly of the vulture killers, misrepresents us by his wrong grasp, and injures himself and stores up much demerit. For this will lead to this misguided man's harm and suffering for a long time. Monks, that one can engage in sensual pleasures without sensual desires, without perceptions of sensual desire, without thoughts of sensual desire, that is impossible. I'll stop here for a moment. So this last part is very important. Buddha is saying that one can engage in sensual pleasures without sensual desires, without perceptions of sensual desire, without thoughts of sensual desire. That is impossible. In some other sutta, I think Majjhima Nikaya 43, the Buddha says that when we enjoy sensual pleasures, there is this tendency to crave for it. So it is impossible to engage in sensual pleasures without the desire arising. And this contradicts some of the later books, for example, in the Secret School, the later part of Buddhism. They taught about this Tantric Buddhism, Tantric Buddhism comes from Tantra Yoga, where they say that the people on the spiritual path can engage in sex and all this thing, and it can even help you to attain enlightenment, which is completely rubbish. And even like the Mahayana sutras, like this Vimalakirti Sutra, where he says the Bodhisattva Manjushri can be like a lay person, do all the enjoy all the worldly pleasures, and still have great attainment and great wisdom. This contradicts, for example, the Magandhya Sutta, where the Buddha says that you cannot find a king or a king's minister enjoying sensual pleasures and yet able to practice the spiritual path like a renunciant and attain the jhanas and the paths and fruits and all that are in stages. So why this is so? Because if you look into the 12 links of dependent origination, you will find that craving and attachment brings about the ego. When you have craving and attachment, the I am arises, the ego arises, I am enjoying. So the spiritual path is to eliminate our ego. So to eliminate the ego, you have to eliminate the craving, the desire. So it is impossible to engage in sensual pleasures without sensual desires, directly contradicting this later Buddhist teaching in the this secret school, esoteric Buddhism. Here, monks, some misguided men learn the Dhamma, discourses, stanzas, expositions, verses, exclamations, sayings, bird stories, marvels, and answers to questions. But having learned the Dhamma, they do not examine the meaning of those teachings with wisdom. Not examining the meaning of those teachings with wisdom, they do not gain a reflective acceptance of them. Instead, they learn the Dhamma only for the sake of criticizing others and for winning in debates, and they do not experience the good for the sake of which they learn the Dhamma. Those teachings, being wrongly grasped by them, conduce to their harm and suffering for a long time. Suppose a man needing a snake, seeking a snake, wandering in search of a snake, saw a large snake and grasped its coils or its tail. He would turn back on him and bite his hand or his arm or one of his limbs. And because of that, he would come to death or deadly suffering. Why is that? Because of his wrong grasp of the snake. So too, here some misguided men learn the Dhamma. And those teachings, being wrongly grasped by them, conduce to the harm and suffering for a long time. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says, these misguided men, they learn the Dhamma, but they do not examine the meaning of the teachings with wisdom. And not examining the meaning of the teachings with wisdom, they do not gain a reflective acceptance of them. They only learn for debating, for criticizing others. Even nowadays, we find some of our so-called Buddhist devotees are like that. Criticize others, but they themselves don't keep the precepts and all that. So, you see here, something interesting in this. The Buddha says that if you examine the meaning of the teachings with wisdom, then you can gain a reflective acceptance of them. This examining the meaning of the suttas and gaining a reflective acceptance means understanding the Dhamma. And understanding the Dhamma, you get right view. And when you get right view, you have entered the stream, the first path. So just by a reflective acceptance of the Buddha's teachings, you get right view and enter the stream. But then after you enter the stream, you still have to work. You have to study some more Dhamma, and keep the sila, and slowly, when you understand on a deeper level, then the three fetters fall away, and you become a sotapanna. So this first part is just understanding the Dhamma and gaining a reflective acceptance of them. Here monks, some clansmen learn the Dhamma, discourses, stanzas, expositions, etc. And having learned the Dhamma, they examine the meaning of those teachings with wisdom. Examining the meaning of those teachings with wisdom, they gain a reflective acceptance of them. They do not learn the Dhamma for the sake of criticizing others and for winning in debates. And they experience the good for the sake of which they learn the Dhamma. Those teachings, being rightly grasped by them, conduce to the welfare and happiness for a long time. Suppose a man needing a snake, seeking a snake, wandering in search of a snake, saw a large snake and caught it rightly with a cleft stick, and having done so, grasped it rightly by the neck. Then although the snake might wrap its claws round his hand, or his arm, or his limbs, still he would not come to death or deadly suffering because of that. Why is that? Because of his right grasp of the snake. So too, here some clansmen learn the Dhamma, and those teachings, being rightly grasped by them, conduce to their welfare and happiness for a long time. Therefore, monks, when you understand the meaning of my statements, remember it accordingly. And when you do not understand the meaning of my statements, then ask either me about it or those monks who are wise. Stop here for a moment. So here, a wise person will learn the Dhamma to understand the meaning of the Dhamma. Then when you can understand it, you accept it. That is learning the Dhamma for the right purpose. Also the Buddha says here, when you understand the meaning of the suttas, the Buddha statements are in the discourses, the suttas of the Buddha. And the Buddha says, remember it accordingly to what he says. But if you do not remember, if you don't understand, then we should ask somebody who understands. That's why when we study the Dhamma, two things are important. Dhamma Savana and Dhamma Sakacca. Dhamma Savana is hearing the Dhamma. Dhamma Sakacca is discussion of the Dhamma. Discussion with Dhamma friends who understand the Dhamma, and then whatever questions you have can be answered. Monks, I shall show you how the Dhamma is similar to a raft, being for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of grasping. Listen and attend closely to what I shall say. Yes, Venerable Sir, the monks replied. The Blessed One said this, Monks, suppose a man in the course of a journey saw a great expanse of water, whose near shore was dangerous and fearful, and whose further shore was safe and free from fear. But there was no ferry boat or bridge going to the far shore. Then he thought, there is this great expanse of water, whose near shore is dangerous and fearful, and whose further shore is safe and free from fear. But there is no ferry boat or bridge going to the far shore. Suppose I collect grass, twigs, branches, and leaves, and bind them together into a raft, and supported by the raft, and making an effort with my hands and feet, I got safely across to the far shore. And then the man collected grass, twigs, branches, and leaves, and bound them together into a raft, and supported by the raft, and making an effort with his hands and feet, he got safely to the far shore. Then when he had got across and had arrived at the far shore, he might think thus, this raft has been very helpful to me, since supported by it, and making an effort with my hands and feet, I got safely across to the far shore. Suppose I were to hoist it on my head, or load it on my shoulder, and then go wherever I want. Now monks, what do you think? By doing so, would that man be doing what should be done with that raft? No, Venerable Sir. By doing what would that man be doing what should be done with that raft? Here, monks, where that man had got across and had arrived at the far shore, he might think thus, this raft has been very helpful to me, since supported by it and making an effort with my hands and feet, I got safely across to the far shore. Suppose I were to haul it onto the dry land and set it adrift in the water, and then go wherever I want. Now monks, it is by so doing that that man would be doing what should be done with that raft. So I have shown you how the Dhamma is similar to a raft, being for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of grasping. Monks, when you know the Dhamma to be similar to a raft, you should abandon even good states. How much more so bad states? Let's stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying that the Dhamma is for the purpose of crossing over to the other shore. The other shore is Nibbana. This shore, which is dangerous and fearful, is samsara, the round of rebirths. So the Buddha is saying that that is the only purpose of the Dhamma, to bring us across to Nibbana. And then lastly, the Buddha says that the Dhamma is similar to a raft, and we should abandon even good states. How much more so bad states? Bad states are of course evil karma, doing evil to the body, speech and mind. Good states maybe like doing charity and all that. If a person is practicing the spiritual path, then it's not important to do charity and other good deeds. The point is to get to the other shore and eliminate the ego, the self. And also it can mean that abandon attachment to good states. Even good states, we should not attach to it. Just like the raft is something useful, but after it has helped you to go across to the other shore, you don't carry it on your head and go around. You just leave it down. So in the same way, when we practice the spiritual path, we do certain practices to get us across. For example, even like ascetic practices and all that. But after it has helped us, then the Buddha says, don't attach to it, don't put it on your head. According to the commentary, says that what the Buddha means is not even to attach to samatha vipassana, serenity and insight. And they quote not attaching to serenity, is not attaching to the jhanas. They quote the Sutta Majjhima Nikaya 66. And not attaching to insight. They quote Majjhima Nikaya Sutta 38. Now the Buddha continues. Monks, there are these 6 standpoints for views. What are the 6? Here monks, an untaught ordinary person who has no regard for noble ones, and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, who has no regard for true men, and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, regards material form or body thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. He regards feeling thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. He regards perceptions thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. He regards volition thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. He regards what is seen, heard, sensed, cognized, encountered, sought, mentally pondered thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. And this standpoint for views, namely, this is self, this the world, after death I shall be permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change. I shall endure as long as eternity. This too he regards thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. Monks, a well-taught noble disciple who has regard for noble ones and is skilled and disciplined in the Dhamma, who has regard for true men and is skilled and disciplined in the Dhamma, regards material form thus, this is not mine, this is not, this I am not, this is not myself. Regards feeling, perception, volition, consciousness. Consciousness here refers to the seen, heard, sensed, cognized, encountered, sought, mentally pondered. As this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. And this standpoint for views, namely, this is self, this is the world. After death I shall be permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change. I shall endure as long as eternity. This too he regards thus, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Since he regards them thus, he is not agitated about what is non-existent. I'll stop here for a moment now. So here the Buddha is talking about 6 standpoints for views. The first five are the five aggregates, body, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness. And the sixth one is views. If you attach to these six things, as this is mine, this I am, this is myself, then you will have views. But a noble disciple sees them rightly, and he is not agitated about what is non-existent, because the five aggregates is not the self, no self. So that's why he says it's non-existent. When this was said, a certain monk asked the Blessed One, "Venerable Sir, can there be agitation about what is non-existent externally?" "There can be, monk," the Blessed One said. "Here, monk, someone thinks thus, alas, I had it, alas, I have it no longer, alas, may I have it, alas, I do not get it. Then he sorrows, grieves and laments. He weeps, beating his breast and becomes distraught. That is how there is agitation about what is non-existent externally." "Venerable Sir, can there be no agitation about what is non-existent externally?" "There can be, monk," the Blessed One said. "Here, monk, someone does not think, alas, I had it, alas, I have it no longer, alas, may I have it, alas, I do not get it. Then he does not sorrow, grieve and lament. He does not weep, beating his breast and become distraught. That is how there is no agitation about what is non-existent externally." "Venerable Sir, can there be agitation about what is non-existent internally?" "There can be, monk," the Blessed One said. "Here, monk, someone has the view, this is self, this is the world. After death I shall be permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change. I shall endure as long as eternity." He hears the Tathagata, or a disciple of the Tathagata, teaching the Dhamma for the elimination of all standpoints, decisions, obsessions, adherences, and underlying tendencies, for the stilling of all formations, sankhara, for the relinquishing of all attachments, for the destruction of craving, for dispassion, for cessation, for nibbana. He thinks thus, so I shall be annihilated, so I shall perish, so I shall be no more. Then he sorrows, grieves and laments. He weeps, beating his breast and becomes distraught. That is how there is agitation about what is non-existent internally. Venerable Sir, can there be no agitation about what is non-existent internally? There can be, monk, the Blessed One said. Here, monk, someone does not have the view, this is self, this is mine, this I am, and all that. I shall endure as long as eternity. He hears the Tathagata, or a disciple of the Tathagata, teaching the Dhamma for the elimination of all standpoints, decisions, obsessions, adherences and underlying tendencies, for the stilling of all formations, for the relinquishing of all attachments, for the destruction of craving, for dispassion, for cessation, for nibbana. He does not think thus, so I shall be annihilated, so I shall perish, so I shall be no more. Then he does not sorrow, grieve and lament. He does not weep, beating his breast and become distraught. That is how there is no agitation about what is non-existent internally. I stop here for a moment. So here externally refers to things of the world. For example, property. So somebody, if he loses his property, then he says, alas, I had it, alas, I have it no longer. So he gets agitated. And if he's not attached to it, then he's not agitated. And internally refers to the self. If a person does not understand the Dhamma, then he comes to listen to the Dhamma, and then he hears the Buddha says, there is no self. Then he becomes confused. He thinks, formerly I had a self, now I have no self, and he has lost his self. So he becomes agitated. But if a person understands the Dhamma, then when the Buddha says there is no self, he does not become agitated. Monks, you may well acquire that possession that is permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change, and that might endure as long as eternity. But do you see any such possession, monks? No, Venerable Sir. Good monks, I too do not see any possession that is permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change, and that might endure as long as eternity. Monks, You may well cling to that doctrine of self that would not arouse sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair in one who clings to it. But do you see any such doctrine of self, monks? No, Venerable Sir. Good monks, I too do not see any doctrine of self that would not arouse sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair in one who clings to it. Monks, you may well take as a support that view that would not arouse sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair in one who takes it as a support. But do you see any such support of views, monks? No, Venerable Sir. Good monks, I too do not see any support of views that would not arouse sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair in one who takes it as a support. Monks, there being a self, would there be what belongs to myself? Yes, Venerable Sir. Or there being what belongs to a self, would there be myself? Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, since a self and what belongs to a self are not apprehended as true and established, then this standpoint for views, namely, this is self, this the world, after death I shall be permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change, I shall endure as long as eternity. Would it not be an utterly and completely foolish teaching? What else could it be, Venerable Sir? It would be an utterly and completely foolish teaching. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying that if there was something, some possession that is permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change, then you should acquire it. But the Buddha asked the monk, can you find any such possession? And they said no, because everything in the world is impermanent. It cannot be unchanging, eternal. Also the Buddha says, if there is a doctrine of self, of the ego, that would not cause sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, then you can cling to it. But is there any such doctrine of self that would not cause suffering? And the monk said no. So the Buddha said, I also cannot find any such doctrine of self that would not bring us suffering. And then Buddha says, if there is a view that would not arouse suffering, sorrow, lamentation, etc., then you can take it as a support. But there is no such view. If you held on to it, that would not give you suffering. So the Buddha says that since there is no self, any teaching that talks about the self is utterly and completely foolish teaching. Monks, what do you think? Is material form or body permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is myself. No, Venerable Sir. Monks, what do you think? Is feeling, perception, volition, consciousness permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is myself. No, Venerable Sir. Therefore, monks, any kind of material form, whatever, any kind of feeling, perception, volition, consciousness, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all of these aggregates, these five aggregates, should be seen as they actually are with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Seeing thus, monks, a well-taught, noble disciple becomes disenchanted with body, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness. Being disenchanted, he becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge, it is liberated. He understands birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says that the five aggregates which we take to be the self, or as belonging to the self, or in the self, or the self in the five aggregates. These five aggregates basically is body and mind. And also we consider as five things, it is body, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness. So because it is impermanent and suffering, it is not fit to regard it as I and mine. Because if we regard it as I and mine, when it changes, then you will suffer. So seeing it in this way, a noble disciple becomes wearied or disenchanted, and then after that he becomes dispassionate, and that will bring him to liberation. Monks, this monk is called one whose shaft has been lifted, whose trench has been filled in, whose pillar has been uprooted, one who has no bar, a noble one whose banner is lowered, whose burden is lowered, who is unfettered. And how is the monk one whose shaft has been lifted? Here the monk has abandoned ignorance, has cut it off at the root, made it like a palm stump, done away with it so that it is no longer subject to future arising. That is how the monk is one whose shaft has been lifted. And how is the monk one whose trench has been filled? Here the monk has abandoned the round of birds that brings renewed being, has cut it off at the root so that it is no longer subject to future arising. That is how the monk is one whose trench has been filled in. And how is the monk one whose pillar has been uprooted? Here the monk has abandoned craving, has cut it off at the root so that it is no longer subject to future arising. That is how the monk is one whose pillar has been uprooted. And how is the monk one who has no bar? Here the monk has abandoned the 5 lower fetters, has cut them off at the root so that they are no longer subject to future arising. That is how the monk is one who has no bar. And how is the monk a noble one whose banner is lowered, whose burden is lowered, who is unfettered? Here a monk has abandoned the conceit I am, has cut it off at the root so that it is no longer subject to future arising. That is how the monk is a noble one whose banner is lowered, whose burden is lowered, who is unfettered. Monks, when the gods with Indra, with Brahma and with Prajapati seek a monk who is thus liberated in mind, they do not find anything of which they could say. The consciousness of one thus gone is supported by this. Why is that? One thus gone, I say, is untraceable here and now. So here the Buddha is talking about the Arahant, is one whose shaft has been lifted, etc. The description has been given by the Buddha, so no need to expand on it. So saying monks, so proclaiming, I have been baselessly, vainly, falsely, and wrongly misrepresented by some recluses and Brahmins thus. The recluse Gautama is one who leads astray. He teaches the annihilation, the destruction, the extermination of an existing being. As I do not proclaim, so have I been baselessly, vainly, falsely, and wrongly misrepresented by some recluses and Brahmins thus. The recluse Gautama is one who leads astray. He teaches the annihilation, the destruction, the extermination of an existing being. Monks, both formerly and now, what I teach is suffering and the cessation of suffering. If others abuse, revile, scold and harass the Tathagata for that, the Tathagata on that account feels no annoyance, bitterness or dejection of the heart. And if others honor, respect, revere and venerate the Tathagata for that, the Tathagata on that account feels no delight, joy or elation of the heart. If others honor, respect, revere and venerate the Tathagata for that, the Tathagata on that account thinks thus, they perform such services as these for the sake of what had earlier come to be fully understood. Therefore, monks, if others abuse, revile, scold and harass you, on that account you should not entertain any annoyance, bitterness or dejection of the heart. And if others honor, respect, revere and venerate you, on that account you should not entertain any delight, joy or elation of the heart. If others honor, respect, revere and venerate you, on that account you should think thus, they perform such services as these for the sake of what had earlier come to be fully understood. I'll stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says that some recluses and Brahmins have been baselessly, vainly, falsely and wrongly misrepresenting the Buddha, that the Buddha teaches the annihilation of a being. But the Buddha is saying, because the Buddha is teaching that there is no being. So other external ascetics, they teach that there is a being, there is a self. So when the Buddha says there is no self, So they accuse him of destroying this self. But the Buddha's teaching is that basically to start with, there is no self. It's just an illusion. Just like you see the simile of these neon lights. Last time, nowadays it's not so common. These neon lights, you have a lot of lights, and the lights light up and stop. Another one will light and stop. Another will light and stop. So it seems as though the light is going in a certain direction, right? That's one will light up and stop. Another will light and stop. So you see like a line of light going continuously. Actually, there's no line of light. It's just an illusion. In the same way, our consciousness, we think, is an unending stream of consciousness, but our consciousness is not an unending stream. Our consciousness arises and passes away extremely fast. Buddha says there's nothing faster than the mind. So our consciousness arises and passes away, arises and passes away. It arises actually because of sankhara. If you look at dependent origination, avijja, paccaya, sankhara, sankhara, paccaya, vijnana. Avijja is ignorance. Because of ignorance, there is sankhara. Sankhara is the will to live. And because of the will to live, our consciousness arises. It arises and passes away. And because of the will to live, again it arises and passes away. And because of the will to live, it arises and passes away. So each time it arises, we are alive. But the moment it ceases, we are dead. So we again, because of our consciousness, the will, we make the consciousness arise again. But we cannot sustain it, it will die again. So we are trying to exist, moment to moment, we are using our will, trying to live. Actually, you cannot live. The moment you exist, you will die. The moment you exist, you will die. So, we are making an extreme effort to exist, but actually we don't exist here. We seem to exist. Just like the line of lights. The line of lights is going. You think it is going, but there is no line of lights going. It's just an illusion. So similarly, that's why in the suttas, the Buddha says there is no living being. So other external ascetics, they don't understand. So they say the Buddha is teaching the annihilation of a being. Therefore, lastly, the Buddha says, if others revile us, then we should not be annoyed. And if they honor and respect also, we should not be delighted. We just take it that they have understood the Dhamma, so they provide such services. Therefore, monks, whatever is not yours, abandon it. When you have abandoned it, that will lead to your welfare and happiness for a long time. What is it that is not yours? Material form or body is not yours. Abandon it. When you have abandoned it, that will lead to your welfare and happiness for a long time. Similarly, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness is not yours. Abandon it. When you have abandoned it, that will lead to your welfare and happiness for a long time. Monks, what do you think? If people carried off the grass, sticks, branches and leaves in this jeta grove, or burned them, or did what they liked with them, would you think people are carrying us off, or burning us, or doing what they like with us? No, Venerable Sir, why not? Because that is neither ourself nor what belongs to ourself. So too, monks, whatever is not yours, abandon it. When you have abandoned it, that will lead to your welfare and happiness for a long time. What is it that is not yours? The body is not yours. Feeling, perception, volition, consciousness is not yours. Abandon it. When you have abandoned it, it will lead to your welfare and happiness for a long time. I'll stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says that these five aggregates, body, feeling, perception and volition, and body, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness, which is basically body and mind, which we take to be the self. The Buddha says it's not the self. Because in some other suttas, the Buddha says we have no control over these five aggregates. They come and they go. So if we cling to it, because these five aggregates are impermanent, if we cling to these five aggregates, then when they change, they will give us suffering. But we tend to identify with these five aggregates. That's why we have the identity view of Sakkaya and Ditthi, which is eliminated by an Arya. Monks, the Dhamma well proclaimed by me, the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus is clear, open, evident and free of patchwork. In the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus, which is clear, open, evident and free of patchwork, there is no future round for manifestation in the case of those monks who are arahants, with chains destroyed, who have lived the holy life, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, reached the true goal, destroyed the fetters of being, and are completely liberated through final knowledge. Monks, the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus is clear, free of patchwork. In the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus, which is clear, etc., free of patchwork, those monks who have abandoned the five lower fetters are all due to reappear spontaneously in the pure abodes, and there attain final Nibbana without ever returning from that world. Monks, the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus is clear, etc., free of patchwork. In the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus, which is clear, etc., those monks who have abandoned the three lower fetters and attenuated lust, hatred and delusion are all once returners, returning once to this world to make an end of suffering. Similarly, those monks who have abandoned three fetters are all stream enterers who are no longer subject to perdition, bound for deliverance and headed for enlightenment. Similarly, those monks who are Dhamma followers or faith followers are all headed for enlightenment. Similarly, those monks who have sufficient faith in me, sufficient love for me, are all headed for heaven. That is what the Blessed One said. The monks were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. That's the end of the sutta. So this final part, the Buddha says that he's talking about those monks who have attained the various Aryan stages. The ones who have attained Arahanthood, the fourth fruit, there is no more rebirth for them. And those who have attained, who have destroyed the five lower fetters, the Anagamins, they will take rebirth in the pure abodes without returning from that world. That's why they're called Anagamins, non-returners. Those who have abandoned the three lower fetters and attenuated, weakened lust, hatred and delusion, once returners, Sakadagamins, they come back to this human birth one more time to make an end of suffering, enter Nibbana. And those who have abandoned three fetters, all stream enterers, Sotapanna, headed for enlightenment, maximum seven more lifetimes. And then those who are Dhamma followers and faith followers are all first path attainers, also headed for enlightenment. Even the monks who have faith in the Buddha, love for the Buddha, they are all headed for heaven, the Buddha says. So this sutta is quite long, only 50 minutes. So there are so many things in this sutta. Started with the Buddha saying that this silly monk has a wrong view, and saying that sensual pleasures are not obstructions. But the Buddha says definitely you cannot engage in sensual pleasures without sensual desires. And then the Buddha says when we learn the Dhamma, we should grasp it correctly, just like grasping a snake. You grasp a snake wrongly, you get bitten. So in the same way, in the Dhamma, when we learn the Dhamma, we have to learn it for the right purpose. The right purpose is to understand the Dhamma. When we understand the Dhamma, then it will help us to cross over to the other shore, just like the raft. So the Dhamma is like the raft, bringing us to the other shore. Then later the Buddha talks about not to be attached to the five aggregates, and not to attach to views, because they give us suffering. So then also the Buddha says, if others praise us or revile us, we should not be moved.